So let's open up the Dinobot file and I'll show you how I built that one. Because I think that one actually is an interesting one, because it looks probably more complicated than it really is. So let's go into my projects here and let's go into my SP Dino. Here we go. So this is my scene here. So you can see that I have a bunch of lights in my scene that I use for the environment. So I can turn off those because I don't actually need those for showing this. So this character or this dino that I got is actually a rigged dino. So if you do get rigged characters, of course you can animate them that way. But this one I actually did not use any sort of rigging I guess sort of controls to actually create it. So actually, just so that you don't even think that I'm using the rig to animate this, let's see if I delete that. Oh, it does have its basic structure, so I do need that in there for the structure because that's how they set it up. But what I can actually do is actually show you. Let me turn off my skeletals here. Let me turn off my joints. So this dino by default looks like this. So it's just sort of, I'll switch this layout to my standard layout right now. So this is sort of the dino, how it comes in its default pose from how I got it. I think I might have bought this model. I definitely did not model this myself. So it has a nice mesh, it has materials, and I actually modified those. These headphones, I think I actually got these headphones from the content browser. So again, using the assets that you have access to always comes in handy. But the way that I actually animated this dino here is actually using something called the deformers inside of Cinema 4D. So up here at the top of our menu, in the default layout, there are different objects that you can add into your scene that cause different properties to happen. So you can see one that say bend, bulge, explosion, squash, warp, displace, wind, bevel. All of these do different things, and in this case I chose to use the bend deformer or the bend modifier depending on who you hear says it, and I actually added that into my scene, and I'm actually using that in order to bend my dinosaur in different ways without actually having to move the character's rig that it comes with. So I'm able to manipulate the different properties that this has, specifically the strength, and I'm actually able to bend and move, and using the techniques that we used in class today, I can actually set keyframes on the strength to control where it's actually going to bend. And you can see I can even bend it in on itself, and I actually have two of these bend deformers, one that controls sort of the up and down and one that controls sort of the left and right. So using these and creating different keyframes in here, I'm able to control the dinosaur to look like it's sort of bopping its head to some music. And there's not a lot of keyframes in here. I have a keyframe to start the strength, and then it comes to a same spot to release it, and then the bottom does the same thing as well. So I actually just have keyframes to actually create this loop here, and it just loops back and forth on itself. And this is only a 90 frame animation, which is 3 seconds. And this has actually 2 different forms of animation in it. So something as seemingly as simple or maybe more involved as this can be totally done relatively quickly. And then after that, it's just sort of getting the look down that you want for your scene. Let's see if I can, yeah, so getting the look down that you have for your scene and having good materials helps a long way as well. So that's actually how I built this scene, and there's actually no other animation in this scene other than this. This is probably one of the more simpler ones that I created. So if you see any of those sort of like emotes on Twitch, you can easily create those inside of Cinema 4D and have a lot of different fun with them. If this is the style you're going for. There's always different styles you can go with, of course. So that's the SP Dino here, and since that was relatively quick, but again, if anyone has any questions on this, let me know, or if I cover something too fast and you want me to repeat it, just let me know. But since this one was pretty quick, I guess I can actually check out the other one, which was the Twitch Bop Dino Spin, and that one is a more involved one. I believe that's this one. Nope, not that one. Twitch logo, nope, not that one. I think it's this one. Nope. It would help if I could remember which one. Let me see real quick, how did that one work? It started with the actual logo, so let's see. Here we go. So this one, this is the Twitch Bop drum spin. So you can see here, this one starts with the Twitch logo sort of bopping its head, and then it sort of transitions out and it becomes the drum that bops up a little bit and then spins as well. So you can see here on this one, I have a good bit more of keyframes in this scene because there's multiple different elements in this actual scene. You can see that it starts with the Twitch sort of bending down, and that again is a bend modifier or bend effector in my actual scene. So that itself is actually just one sort of keyframed control here that actually moves it in my scene. Now, in addition to it bopping, it also spins and it scales down. So let me isolate this a bit. So it does do this sort of bopping motion, and then it actually, the Twitch logo itself actually rotates and scales down to 0. That's how I make it disappear in this case. And then for the let me not delete it that way. I forgot that doesn't actually work in this one anymore. For the drums, which comes in later, that actually scales in from 0 and then becomes bigger, and then I use sort of the drum beater, which is another null group, to actually push it forward in space in order to make it look like it's actually moving up and down towards the camera. So you can see here on the side panel, I actually have a group for the drum controller, then I have another null for the beater, which actually moves the drum, and then inside of that I have all the different parts of the actual drum. So I actually don't manipulate the drum directly, I only manipulate the different null groups that I have set up here in order to actually move it in 3D space. So you don't actually have to touch your real geometry, and a lot of times you don't want to mess with your original geometry just because you might have changes, you might have to move it around individually because of, maybe there's something you want to change later on, or a client comes in, they want, to update something or whatever. Sometimes it's really handy not to actually manipulate your animated pieces directly. Maybe I don't want to have the top on it. Maybe I need it to be hollow. If I actually had animated all of these directly, then that would be a lot harder to do and to keep everything together. And also, maybe I want to move the whole thing. So maybe I put this in a null and I want to move it over here. So now I can move it around and not have it affect this animation that's below it. So it gives you a lot of flexibility having it in the different null groups. And then after that, it's just sort of, trying your animation over and over again, playing it, see what looks good, seeing what doesn't look good, taking a step back from it, making sure that the rendering looks good. So for this one, I chose to use the cell renderer inside of Cinema 4D because I wanted to look more flat shaded rather than more realistic. But, this could have been done with anything. If I wanted to use Redshift, if I wanted to use Octane or Arnold, which is one that I use for a lot of the renders for this one, just because it worked really fast and gave me the pseudo-realistic look I was going for. You know, any render engine totally works with the animation. It's just sort of what's the look that you're actually going for. But yeah, you can see here that there are a bunch of different elements in here, and this one is slightly more involved, but the main idea of the keyframes are pretty straightforward for the most part. It's using position, scale, rotation, and I'm using the bend deformer in order to actually bend my logos. And again, there's a whole bunch of different ones in here that you can play around with to actually use. I mean, if I go in here, make a cube, and say, let's add a different one. Let's add one that does explosions. Let's see if this actually will. So explosion will work, but you do need to make sure that your objects have segments, I believe. Oh, segments, not scale. So now you can see that now, if I modify my explosion time, my cube explodes in my scene. So, and of course, you know, there's nothing to say that I can't animate this property. So set a keyframe at 0, set a keyframe at 30. I want it to explode to about 7%. Hit spacebar, and now it animates and explodes and freezes in time. So any of these properties that you see here that have this little circle next to it can be animated. And there are some ways of animating ones that don't even have that there. But for the most part, any of these things that have that sort of mark next to it can be manipulated and animated over a period of time. Sometimes for different objects you might have to create different, or have to have more definition on them, which is what I did by increasing the segments. So if you see something that doesn't actually do anything, it might be because there's not enough detail in your object. Either you have to subdivide it using the modeling tools that we've done, or you have to adjust your segments in order to increase the details in it. And you know, keep in mind that sometimes you can add too much detail, and that might crash your computer, or crash your Cinema 4D rather, most of the time, hopefully. So yeah, so any of these properties can be animated. So I definitely encourage everyone to explore these and see which ones work, which ones don't work well for what you're trying to do. You know, they give you a lot of different power and flexibility in creating different animations, and this is really just like sort of the beginning of what you can do in terms of animating inside of Cinema 4D. So two quick breakdowns of two projects here, the Twitch Bop Drum Spin and the Dino Bop. Maybe at a later date I'll go over the other ones, or maybe we'll go over some more complicated projects next class. But just in case, I will leave this up here. Just make sure that everyone knows that next week you just have to do your ideation or creation of your idea for your brand project, the idea, the concept, the sketch, and to watch or read the Animation Principles articles. They will be really, really helpful. And this will all be on Blackboard and emailed as well. So in case you forget or you missed anything during class, it will be in multiple places. But that's going to be it for today. Thank you everyone for attending class. I hope everyone has a good rest of the week and weekend.